The rain had not stopped for 3 hours, and yet Ethan Cole sat in the back of his black sedan, watching a woman in her 60s walk alone down a flooded street, refusing every single time he offered to drive her home. What he saw in the next 10 minutes would shatter everything he believed about the woman who had served his family for 22 years, and about himself. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that remind us what truly matters, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below. Share this with someone who needs it. And subscribe to Kindness Corner, because this story is about to change the way you see the people you walk past every single day. Ethan Cole was 31 years old. And by every measure the world used, he had already won. He ran a technology empire his father had built, and he had doubled. His name appeared on magazine covers, and his calendar was managed by 3 assistants who scheduled his life down to the minute. But Ethan had long ago stopped feeling anything about his success. Wealth, to him, had become background noise, the hum of an engine he no longer noticed. The only warmth left in his enormous glass house came from an unlikely source. Mrs. Abigail Rowe, the elderly woman who had cleaned his floors, cooked his meals, and quietly kept his household running since he was 9 years old. Abigail had come into the Cole family's life during its darkest hour, back when Ethan's mother was dying, and his father was drowning in grief and business debts. She was the one who tucked young Ethan into bed when no one else remembered to, who packed his lunches with little notes tucked inside the napkin, who sat with him through thunderstorms because she noticed he was afraid, though he never told a soul. Over the years, as the Cole fortune grew into a towering empire, Abigail remained precisely the same humble quiet, dressed always in the same navy uniform with a white apron, refusing every raise Ethan tried to give her, refusing every offer of a nicer apartment, refusing, always, to talk about her life outside those walls. It was a Tuesday evening in late autumn, when Ethan noticed something strange. Abigail left work at exactly 6:15 as she always did, but instead of walking toward the bus stop on 5th Street where he assumed she caught her ride home, she turned the opposite direction, into the narrow streets behind the old Market District streets Ethan himself had never once set foot in. He watched her from the window of his office, her small frame growing smaller under the streetlights, 2 plastic grocery bags swinging from her tired hands, and something in his chest tightened. He had never once, in 22 years, asked where Abigail actually lived. That night, driven by a restlessness he couldn't name, Ethan told his driver to wait, put on an ordinary coat over his suit, and followed her on foot through the rain. He told himself it was concern. Perhaps if he was honest, it was guilt. A man can share a house with someone for 2 decades and know almost nothing true about her life. And that thought had begun to eat at him the moment he saw her walk into the dark. She moved slower than he expected, favoring her left leg slightly, pausing once to lean against a lamppost and catch her breath before continuing. Ethan kept his distance, ducking behind parked cars and shuttered storefronts, feeling absurdly like a stranger in his own city. The streets grew narrower and dimmer, the buildings older, paint peeling from doors, until Abigail stopped in front of a small crumbling apartment building, with a broken light fixture swinging over its entrance. She knocked twice, and the door opened to reveal a young girl, maybe 7 years old, who threw her arms around Abigail's waist with a joy so pure it made Ethan's throat tighten from across the street. He watched through a cracked window as Abigail entered a cramped 1-room apartment, where 2 more children waited, a boy around 10, thin and quiet, and an older teenage girl who immediately took the grocery bags from Abigail's hands and began unpacking them onto a small table. Ethan realized with a jolt that felt like the ground shifting beneath him that these were not neighbors. Abigail moved among them with the ease of someone who had done this every single night for years, tucking in the youngest, checking the boy's homework, speaking softly to the teenager about a test coming up. This was not a visit. This was home, or the closest thing to family Abigail had built for herself outside of the Cole household. Ethan learned the truth only later from the building's landlord, a tired man who assumed Ethan was a social worker checking in. The 3 children were siblings, orphaned 4 years earlier when their parents were killed in a highway accident. Their closest living relative, an aunt, had taken them in briefly before abandoning them to the system, unable or unwilling to carry the burden. It was Abigail who had found them, Abigail who had refused to let them be separated into different foster homes, Abigail, who had used almost every cent of the modest salary Ethan paid her to keep a roof over their heads and food on their table, working 2 additional cleaning jobs on weekends that Ethan had never known about, walking miles each night because she could not afford both rent and bus fare. For 22 years, Ethan had believed he understood sacrifice because he had built a company from nothing alongside his father. Standing in the rain outside that broken window, watching a 64-year-old woman braid a little girl's hair with hands cracked from decades of labor, he understood for the first time what sacrifice actually looked like. It looked like silence. It looked like refusing raises so as not to invite questions. It looked like carrying the weight of 3 children's entire futures on shoulders already bent from a lifetime of service, and never once asking for help, because Abigail had learned long ago that some people give not because they expect anything back, but because giving is the only thing that makes the pain of the world bearable. Ethan did not knock on that door that night. He stood in the rain a long while, coat soaked through, and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years, not admiration, not pity, but shame, followed by a fierce and sudden resolve. The next morning, he did not offer Abigail a raise. He did something she could not refuse. He quietly purchased the apartment building, renovated the unit the children lived in, established a trust in the children's names for their education, and hired a full-time tutor. All arranged so carefully that Abigail would never have to know it came from him unless she chose to ask. When she eventually did ask, standing in his kitchen with tears she tried and failed to hide, Ethan simply told her that she had spent 22 years taking care of his family, without ever asking for anything in return. And it was time someone took care of hers. If this story moved something in you tonight, if it reminded you that the quietest people often carry the heaviest loads, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. It truly means the world to this channel. And before you go, do one thing for me: comment the word kindness below if you promise to look a little closer at the people around you, because you never know whose quiet sacrifice is holding up an entire world you cannot see.